All
Yeah,
right.
go.
So here we go. You remember yesterday that I said that if we pull back, then I would expect a certain thing. We got that thing, and then we would make a new high. And then we did, but then something else happened. We also started to wobble. And as I actually replayed yesterday, replayed the first hour. And one of the things that I noticed is that every test up was immediately met with a large candle down. I'm not going to go bother even to show you, but as I replayed it and it didn't occur to me real time, I sat there and thought, well, shoot, you're gapping and going. Why are the sellers having so much success? Why are they, why can't the buyers just like rip through this like they should? You break through the overnight high, you make a new high on the day, and then Delta wasn't there. That's the other thing I found is that the second or third time we made a new high, Delta wasn't there. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's weird. Don't you think that that sort of looks like sellers want a better price? And in fact, that's what they wanted. I think I would have wanted that. And then they did. And then we got a massive gap fill. I mean, a giant, 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 massive gap fill. So didn't get to see or participate in any of that. I was distracted with other things, but that's what happened. And now let's talk about today. So here's what I think. If you, and I know this is not going to be awesome to look at, but you can see like we basically right on the all-time point of control of this bull move up. And if you look at the daily profile, not going to be that easy to look at, but I mean you can see we are just consolidating in this range here, and like it looks like a flag, I guess you could say that, but it's like not a lot is happening. We're just kind of working in this channel, so to speak, um, and you know, I think if anything, the buyers have not really been able to take this out. I mean, it's kind of almost kind of a weak move up. If you're honest with yourself, you have to say like the fact that we can't really the difference in the slope of these lines is pretty clear in my view, and the sellers have done a pretty good job of sort of collapsing this down. And that, I'm not making any predictions about what's going to happen over the next couple of days. I'm just pointing out that it, we are in a bullish environment, and that can't be denied. But the fact that the bulls have had several attempts at all-time new highs and just haven't been able to break out of this consolidation area, I think is something to keep your eyes on, something to be thoughtful of, and explains at least part of why we had such an outsized move from yesterday. And today, my expectation is largely that we will look at two possibilities. One, and one third as a unlikely but possible. The two ideas is that we're going to balance around this point of control. So even though this moved, it's because it's only what's visible. But that right where the overnight point of control is where the point of control for this entire area. So I don't really expect any impulsive moves right away because of the amount of strength that was involved in this. And you'll see some blue lines here. I'm kind of experimenting with an idea about what we were talking about in footprint. And what I'm basically expecting is that any move in either direction is likely to be faded, and with the idea that it will return to the other side. Now, the only, I suppose, exception to that would be is that if we move up and fail first, then I may be more willing to hold to the downside until we get to a major structure side. But if we pull back and move up, then I will not be willing to hold that. That's just going to be it's a balance move. As soon as the move's over, that's sort of the protocol for today. It's going to tell me that we're in a balance situation. The return to balance higher scenario is the idea that we do move down in some way, and we get this impulse reversal idea. We make it back through this auction. We take out the overnight high, pull back, and then we push through this structure, and then we're attempting to get up to the point of control of where we left, which is right up in that 220. Yeah, it's a lot higher actually, but we're going to attempt to, and it'll look like poking through this area, pulling back to the point of control, poking through this area, pulling back, and I don't expect us to get there, but it would be an attempt to get there. The only thing that I
Hmm.
will point out is that I see two distinct auctions here. And I don't know how or why they got formed, but if we are not able to do this, if we're not able to return to balance, then likely what we'll do is form a new balance area and then just work within this range. So those would be scenarios like suppose maybe like 1, 2, and 3, where 2 and 3 largely look the same until this sort of false breakout move fails. The fourth
Right.
potential scenario, and this has nothing to do with really the setup of the morning, is that if sellers take over and they push us back down into this auction down here, and buyers just can't hold it. And in which case, we're going to see, some ugliness. And it's on really the wrong day because my ESPP stuff happens today. So I'd really like, kind of hoping for scenario 2, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
um, you know,
Well, the market always does what you hope.
it always
So
does. It does exactly what I hope when I'm not trading it. Yes, that's true. Um, okay, so uh, battle plans. All right, here's exactly what I'm looking at. In the balance scenario, the very first thing that I would expect to see happen is an impulse down to this auction, a check down into VWAP. There's some support structure down here, uh, and you can see with my arrows that I'm not saying like a price going in this area. I would expect an impulse off of the open with a pace of bid exhaustion. I would like to see a cumulative delta pole shift. Talked about that. I'd like to see participation drying up in the delta histogram, and that I'd love to see a wave delta algo happen. And all of that will look like something that, where we push down like this. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's a new low. I would like it not to be a new low if possible. But then, we're getting an imbalance signal right here. The pace of bid has, you'll see a big, large red line on the pace of bid. And then the histogram starts to dry up and there's less and less participation. And then you see a big wave up like that. And then hopefully a histogram, excuse me, not histogram, delta pole shift, which would mean we've spiked all the way down in here and then start building into that. And then that would
right.
tell me is that we're very likely to return back to this auction and possibly break the overnight high if that happens. Um,
And the stop would the entry would be on that, um, obviously on those delta shift or what have you. But the stop, are you going to put the stop below that low, that lower low, or are you just going to put a number stop in there,
no,
like a
yeah,
ball?
it's going to be below the lower low. So if this scenario happens like I'd hope, then what that would look like is that we pop down, we do something like this, we take it like that, and then my entry is going to be somewhere right there, and there's the stop. That's it.
Gotcha.
And if that gets taken out, then you get one more shot at it. And if that doesn't work, then you're wrong and something else is going on.
Right.
If we do go up first, now this one's going to be trickier, I think, because what we should see is absorption. What we should see is a wave imbalance. We should see a reference failure. So this would look like going up first, almost like yesterday, really. Going up, taking it out, sort of looking okay, but not perfectly okay. And it's one of those situations where you're just like, well, it's about to take off. I got to be in. I got to be in. This is about to take off. It's not about to take off. It's about to suck you in so that you can be left holding the bag when it does this. So if I see a situation that, not price action, but where, sellers are present, sellers are making progress, but sort of, new highs on low delta or less delta, I'm going to be highly suspicious of that in the opening swing. And then from there, if I see that, then I'm going to try and play outside in on the balance scenario, and I would expect a test of the lower side of the auction, and definitely VWAP if that happens. So those are the things I expect on the balance scenario. And I guess you can read the alternative, which I don't expect, but if we do test up and then we start to see an imbalance and an impulse with delta and a pullback with algos, a wave, a buy imbalance, that was what you're seeing here, then it's going to look like we're going to go higher, and we need to find more sellers before we turn over. So
Mm.
those are the main ideas today.
So it sounds like one and two are like mean reversion kind of setups,
Yeah,
basically.
I believe
All
I
three play
believe
at the
so
same.
at this point.
Yeah.
And let me
All
call
right.
out one other thing because yesterday it happened and I realized I do have to prepare for this. If neither of those things happen in the first 30 minutes, then I'm going to judge the auction and decide whether or not I'm going to come up with a new plan or wait for one of them to happen. I can't. What I can't do is just take a setup because it's there. I have to have a plan associated with it. So if the market does something unexpected, I can't go along with it. I've got to be a detective and figure out what I think it's doing, and then decide whether or not the setup makes sense for risk to reward and all of that. Didn't do that yesterday.
Right. I mean, really, what we're talking about when we talk about, or for me, when I talk about a battle plan, it's with the current picture on the short-term basis. It's not an hour and a half from now. It's now, right? If it does this now, this is what I'm going to do. And if it doesn't do this now, then I'm going to be developing a different battle plan. And I think that's what you're saying too.
Yeah, it is, and
Same.
what I've discovered about myself is that anytime I venture into the unknown and don't repeat the steps that made something clear to me in the past, I fail
Right.
every time.
Right.
I
That's when
cannot
you,
deal with the
that's when,
unknown. I have to map with what I can know. I'm comfortable with not knowing the future, but I'm not comfortable with not knowing what something means to me and working with it anyways. That just ends up like the the old Daffy Duck, if you ever saw that, where he's, uh, you know, jab, parry, spare, boom, bah, and it smacks him in the face, and it's
yeah.
like, yeah, that, like, I
Yeah.
can't do
Good
that anymore.
analogy.
So, all
Good.
right, now we're
Well,
looking
that's
at
what I
the.
started to do on every trade, by the way, is
I,
that battle
I
plan.
thought I had. I thought I was there, and I realized yesterday that I wasn't. So I'm really working hard on
Yeah.
my flight checklist and not skipping steps.
So, can you see my screen?
Again,
Okay, so this is the daily chart. I just wanted to point out the fact that as of today, as of yesterday, with the volume that we experienced yesterday, the VPOC has shifted from down here at 49 all the way up here. Now this is from the lows that were put in back in whenever the hell this was in October. Okay, so this is the impulse up followed by that flagging balance thing that you were looking at on the Dow. Now we've shifted enough volume so that that 59 and a quarter area, which is the same thing we're balancing on the Dow right now, the same area we're balancing basically in the ES right now, becomes the point of control up here. And typically when that happens, when you get that VPOC shift, I've seen where we usually get a directional move out of this area. And because it's on the big picture daily chart, I thought it was significant to mention, only because, it's now time where we're probably going to get some sort of a move out of this 3659 area. It would probably mean taking out this high. It would definitely mean taking out this high or coming back into balance and maybe retesting some of this lower stuff. So, with that in mind, I drew it in here just to kind of show that this balance that we've experienced over this last little while is pretty Gaussian, pretty balanced. And we're sitting right here in the middle of that. So what also is interesting, and I kind of forgot to say it, is where this bottom of balance is 36.20 is the LVN right here. And it is where this high is, and this high, and this high, and this high, and this high, and that low are, right? So it's very clearly defined, very clearly defined. What won't be clearly defined is actually being in it when it happens, okay? Because my thinking is that now we're going to get a fake out to both sides. So my initial scenario is that, at least initially, what I'm going to be looking for, since we have this impulse in the overnight session that pushes us up, flags, and moves higher, I'm going to be watching this particular area because this is where this where we are right now is where the lows of the overnight session are, where the decision point of yesterday was, and the directional point. And look at all these highs that line up with this area. And this is where we are right now. Okay. So I'm going to be watching this area right now to see, do we get this? Do we get this? Or, which is more likely to me, I think what we're going to get is something like, and I want to do it in a different color because it's going to be more clear. I think we're going to get this. Push up, rejection. Or push down, rejection. I just think we're going to get a wiggle here. That's going to be a short-term kind of fake out move. And I think we'll get that pretty much at the open. So my battle plan around that is to watch this little bit of action that's going on in here and not fading the impulse move away from this area. And it's key because it's the impulse from this high volume node. It's an impulse away from these previous resistance areas. So if we impulse down, I would expect that we're going to get a lot of downside participation. If we impulse through this, I would think we're going to get a lot of covering the short type of
the impulse after the check, right? The check up and then impulse. That's what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm thinking that, you know, we could just get an impulse. We could get an open drive higher, right? We could get an open drive lower. But that is so atypical. It's not normal to make it that easy. What I'm expecting to have happen is that fake out move. And that's why because I don't know what's going to happen right here at the open, I'm just going to watch the first maybe 30 minutes, depending on what happens. Maybe it's going to be the first hour. But I want to see this move from this area. I want to see the strength of this move from the area. And my initial thinking is, and this does not include the fake and then go, or the fake and go, fake down and fake up, you know, that kind of a thing. But what I really want to see is kind of take a step back and see what that bigger picture move is from this area, because I think it's critical right now. Now, I'm leaning that my expectation really is that because the bigger picture is in a bullish stance and the intermediate picture is in this balanced neutral state, it's more likely that it goes in the direction of the bigger picture, which is up. We should be able to see that right away. We should be able to recognize that. It should be an impulse higher that moves away from this area and likely doesn't have to retest. Okay, so what I'm thinking is maybe after a wiggle, so I'm going to give it some space, whatever it happens in the morning, we start to move up and we start to traverse these ranges up in here, get back to the point of control like you're saying, and kind of hover up there. And that would be the balance before the next day, which I would expect it to go. Okay. And it would be an upper balance. It would be from here. It might do this first and then this, or it might do this first and just go. But that's what I'm expecting the bigger picture of the upside move to start to look like. On the other side is, you know, the downside move, and that'll be, or at least should be, relatively clear. And if we take it from here, we should be starting to see this coming back into this balance and not be able to hold.
Right.
I mean, this area is going to become critical.
Right. Yep.
And if we take out 20 and 24, the bigger picture is changing. And this is where the 20 period moving average is. And by the way, I think it's important to remember that that would be a second test of this trend line and the 20 period moving average. So not that it can't do a second test, but you know what second tests are like. You know, people are the test, right? You go to an area where people should be buying, they buy. Well, they did that already. So are we saying if it comes back down here again just a day later, will they still be there to buy? Maybe.
Yeah, but they'll
Less
probably want a
likely
better
to buy,
price, though, wouldn't you think?
I would think.
I'm gonna
Or they
buy it a
might be
second
full.
time. I want a better price.
They might be full. So I'm going to be watching this key area, I think, in the open. And my idea is initially to kind of keep your hands off, try to identify the bigger picture move out of here, because this should represent a bigger picture move. We should be able to see it. Now, that does not mean that we should see it in the first 10 minutes or even the first wiggle, but it should be visible to us in something that allows us to kind of get behind it. And one thing that you pointed out, and when you were talking, and I want to agree with you, is the delta. Even though I wasn't leaning on delta yesterday, after we initially moved up and we started to balance in the upper range, which should have been super bullish, should have been an area where the bulls were in firm control and they just stair stepped higher. Delta was very weak up there,
Hmm.
even in this environment of being in the middle of rollover. So I think delta is going to be useful to us today, and I'm going to be looking for that particular thing as the who is the aggressor and is the aggressor winning, um, and 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 use that to kind of think to give me the directional side of things, because I think we're really close to having a directional move on the bigger picture.
Hmm. Hmm. That's great.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. All
All
right.
right, we
Well,
talking tonight?
yes. I would like to talk tonight, and if 5 o'clock Central, is that time okay?
Yeah,
Or we can go, or maybe even earlier
yeah.
if that's better for you.
No, that time is perfect actually.
The big thing
Allows
I
me to
want to
take care
talk
of my
about.
son when he gets home, do all the other stuff I gotta do.
Brilliant. Okay, so one of the big things, and let me stop this.